الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Welcome everybody to the Safina Society Nothing But Facts live stream on a gorgeous Tuesday, filming right live out of New Brunswick, New Jersey, 1 mile away from the Robert Wood Johnson University Medical Center. Third story, the soup kitchen is on the first story, and we're on the third story. Of course, the big news today is the death of Iran's president and prime minister. Right? It's both the president and the foreign minister, Hossein Amir Abdullahian and Ibrahim Raisi, in a helicopter crash. I'm surprised, first of all, that they would put the president and the foreign minister in the same flight, but I guess some countries do that if there's a resource limitation. It makes sense that that happens when they have limited resources, but usually when they don't put these big officials in the same flight, usually. Okay. And you wonder if this was something that was intentional or was not, but apparently most of what's being said is not, that it was not intentional. And you have a lot of Syrians who are not shedding a tear. Okay, they're not shedding a tear. A lot of Shawam blame Raisi for all of what happened, a lot of what happened in Syria. So much killing from the Iran side in Sham. So there's a lot of people who are not shedding a tear for him. Okay. We have not much to say about this. It's not like we're going to have any news that any other sources are going to have. But let me take this question. What are the hudud punishments, and do they still apply today? Well, the answer is, in theory, all of the Sharia applies until the end of time. In terms of the hukum, the belief about the application of all of the Sharia applies until the end of time. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was sent kaffatan linnas, to all people. Kaffa, all people. So people today are part of all people. So this is one of the bid'ah in theology or belief, to think that the Prophet, peace be upon him, was only sent to the people of the past, or his people, or the people up to modern times. Really? So then where's the line? So the Prophet, peace be upon him, was sent to all people, and his Sharia is applicable at all times and all places. The question is up to the ruler or up to the people how they're going to apply it. When they're going to apply it, that's really up to the people, but it is an obligation at all times. So what are the hudud? First of all, punishment in Islam is for two things. In general, public sinning and the oppression of people. And the method of the punishment is in two different ways. One is called hudud and one is called ta'zir. As for hudud, it's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said explicitly and listed it in the Quran. And as for ta'zir, it's the discretionary punishment of the ruler, of the government. They're the ones who decide. So the ruler can decide, or his shura can decide. His senate, they could decide what should be the right punishment for this. And there are differences in the madhabs. And there are some conditions we're going to cover in a second. The had crimes are 9: murder, injury, baghi, rebellion, apostasy, fornication, zina, qadf, false accusation of zina, sariqa, robbery, and it has conditions, hiraba, terrorizing the public, stopping road, any terrorizing in public, drinking alcohol, shurb al-khamr, publicly drinking alcohol. And justice now, in terms of there are 3 here. If you notice, there are victims here. Murder, of course. Injury, of course. And sariqa. I was robbed of my wealth. So the body and the wealth. There are victims here. In this case, 2 of these have a victim, the one who was robbed and the one who was injured. One of them has inheritors of victims, of the victim. The inheritors, the immediate, who would have inherited his money. So these people have a choice of 3. This is called in today's parlance restitutional justice. In other words, it's justice in which the victims are involved. And the victims they have a choice in what happens. It's not that the way the system is today, where the criminal is taken to court and the victim is just sitting in the back of the courtroom watching. No. If the criminal is found guilty, then we bring that victim up and say, you're part of now the punishment. So you could do three things. You could do afu, you can forgive him altogether. You can ask for the diya, you can ask for the blood money, and you can not accept any of that and insist on qisas. So in the case of injury and robbery, the victim of this crime has the choice by himself. But in the case of murder, the inheritors have this choice. Every one of them has the choice. Now, of course, now you can't have a partial execution. So if one of them says that I want the blood money or I forgive, then immediately it downgrades to either blood money or execution. And everybody can make their own choice. Blood money or forgiveness. So afu, if I choose to forgive, then my share of inheritance doesn't have to be paid. But if my brother, let's say we're the only two inheritance, let's hypothetically say I had a brother, he does not want to forgive. He wants the money. And I choose to forgive. I don't want the money. Then the criminal only owes half the diya. So by the percentages of inheritance, the inheritance law percentages get involved here. And if you forgive, then you're only forgiving your percentage of the inheritance law. So at the end of the majlis, whatever the amount of people who want the diya, they're going to require, he's got to pay that. Now, who pays it? His tribe. So again, the restitutional justice is in three ways. Either qisas, I want to see him punished. Or diya, I'll take the blood money instead. Or afu, complete forgiveness. And it's up to the victims. Okay? So now we ask the question, what are the actual qisas? What are the qisas? Let's say everyone says, no, we want the qisas. So for murder, if it's proven, it's execution. If it's injury, it's eye for an eye. And the murder and the eye for an eye, this happens exactly how he did it, provided that there's no torture involved. Number 3, rebellion. The punishment of rebels, al-bughat, is execution. The punishment for apostasy is execution after 3 days, chance to repent. The punishment for zina, fornication, and adultery, if the person was not married, then it's 100 lashings and 1 year imprisonment in the Maliki school. For adultery, if the person was married, it's a rajm. Okay. Number 6, al-qadf, which is falsely accusing somebody of zina, 80 lashes. Robbery, sariqa, it has conditions. There are conditions to robberies, not just even like pickpocketing. It's not any old robbery. Theft, I mean. It's robbery. That means you broke a lock. You stole something at a certain value. And you left with it. So for that, you lose your hand. You're going to lose your hand. For hiraba, it's execution or banishment, and the ruler may not forgive this because it's public. So a lot of people are scared, and there's no way to see who's scared and ask them all. The ruler may not forgive this. So people were, what is an example of someone terrorizing the public? Hiraba. Like someone opening up, let's say an abandoned road or a road where the police don't go oftentimes. They go set up shop there, and as you're walking past, they come in the old days, a gang, and they take all your stuff. Okay, so it's hiraba. You're terrorizing the people in public. And then number 9, shurb al-khamr is 80 lashes. And that's based upon Sayyidina Ali was asked by Sayyidina Umar about this, and he said, when someone drinks, they say things that could be, he could say qadf. So qiyasan ala al-qadf. It's 80 lashes based upon that. Okay, now the compensation. What is the compensation? It's 1,000 dinars of gold. And the dinar at the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him, was 4.25 grams of gold, with differences of opinion on this, just to let you know. You may hear a different number. But the majority number that's said is that the dinar of the time of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam was 4.25 grams of gold. So that makes the blood money of the human body to be 4,250 grams of gold. Omar, why don't you burn that up? Look that up. Okay, what is today 4,250 grams of gold worth? Okay, in dollars today, as of what date are we? What are we? May 25th. Okay, he's going to look that up right now. So that's the full day of the body. But there are other body parts that are so important that they are worth the whole dia. For example, you lose your intellect, any of your senses, smell, taste, sight, speech, hearing, the ability to have sex, the ability to have offspring, the ability to sit down, the ability to stand up. So, for example, if you were to paralyze somebody, right? The head of the male body part, the male org member, the nose, this part of the nose, which called the marin, the testicles, the ability to lactate. For a woman, she can't lactate anymore. That's a whole body, whole dia. Okay, the skin on the top of the head. One eye, if someone only had one eye to see, they're blind in the left eye, and you poked out the right eye. Entire dia, the whole thing. All other injuries are subject to judgment, which is called hukuma. Now, after these 9 crimes, there are many other crimes people do in the world, in society. So what about them? For that, we said there's ta'zir. Ta'zir is discretionary punishment by the ruler or his shura or the government. And what is he allowed to do? He's allowed to imprison the person an amount of time that would make him change his ways. He's not allowed to put him in jail for life, just like that, the way we do here. If you want to talk about cruel and unusual punishment, that's extremely cruel and unusual punishment. Ask any person, you committed a crime, you want to just get flogged and go home to your wife and your kids? Yeah, he may be a criminal, but he may be like American Gangster. He's good to his family. There are many criminals, many mafiosos. They're bad people. They commit crimes. They're bad people for the society. But they're good to their family. So why are you going to deny someone a father? Do you know that there was a statistic the other day that was stated that if you were to reduce illegitimacy or remove illegitimacy from the crime statistics, it would go down by like 2/3. Most criminals, they're illegitimate. They have no dads. So if you're putting all the dads in jail, you're actually producing more criminals. You start to wonder, maybe that's what you guys intended. So he is allowed to imprison him for a time that would change his behavior. Another thing is that he's allowed to publicly condemn him. It's a funny thing in Qatar, there's a page in the newspaper way back in the day when people used to get the newspaper in the morning and read it. And it's a page on people who are caught speeding, and it puts their picture. I mean, speeding is not a big deal, right? But still, it's embarrassing for somebody to have their picture in the paper. So if you caught speeding on the road, okay, they put your picture up. Okay, the next one he's allowed to do is he's allowed to flog you any amount of floggings, as opposed to the other madhahib that you can't pass 40. Okay. The next one is if you're harming people, he's allowed to force you to sell your house and move. He's allowed to do that. If you're a nuisance to the neighborhood, he can do that. If you are cheating people, he's allowed to fine you for the amount of money that you cheated people. But what is he's allowed to execute you too. Drug dealers, for example, like the guy all the way at the top. Do you know how many lives this guy ruins? So drug dealer, execution is on the table. He can execute. But what may he not do? He may not take your money. We can't fine people for things that, unless there is a direct permission in the Sharia to fine that person. Okay, let's talk about the nature of the floggings. Lashes are with a leather strap that may not break the skin or break the bones. Cannot do either one. And the hitting should not be light and should not be hard, and should be between the shoulder blades on the back of the person. And he shouldn't wear a heavy garment that would block the strikes, nor should he be naked or shirtless. I mean, he should be sitting down, and he should not be wrapped up. He shouldn't be tied up or handcuffed or anything like that. And he gets the strikes sitting down, much like we saw in the Associated Press. As I said, when they go Associated Press filming Indonesian floggings and pretending to be outraged. There's nothing there. The flogging is not that hard because you're not allowed to use both joints, the elbow and the shoulder. So you could flog like this or you could flog like this. There's no roundabout as if you're like an Olympic thrower. You know that sport that Sheikh Harun used to play. What is it called? Oh, give me so I can show them what you're not allowed to use. You know the hammer throwing? Or that big ball that they used to throw? They turn all the way around, use all their joints, and fling that thing. You're not allowed to do that. You use one joint. Here, you're not. This is a completely unlawful whip. This is unlawful to use.
Yes, we have a whip.
Yeah, we have a whip here. I mean, just in case. I mean, it is lawful if I'm trying to kill someone or really hurt them. If we have a thief here or something, I can use this on him. So it's a whip. I'm gonna have to say, "Excuse me, thief, back up a few meters so I can wrap up my whip." Hey guys, get out of the way! I'm about to whip this guy. No, it's not. But we do have this whip, and what it is it goes from thick to thin to much thinner to very, very thin, and this is what would have cut your skin right here, this little thing right here. That would cut the skin. When you whip this thing, it moves so quickly. So what will be the Shadee strap? Probably this thickness right here. Yeah, you can take that off. This would be a Shadee strap right here. Okay, and it should not have a whiplash effect. We're not allowed to do that. Okay. We'll keep it there. Okay. And the punishment should be witnessed by the public. Punishments are meant to scare people off. It's not supposed to be. And I'm going to actually double check this because I did read somewhere that it's the victim's right to do the punishment. It's his right to enact the punishment, like to do it. And Allah knows best. So that's the answer to the first question that we had here. We have guests coming on from Princeton, and before that, we will continue with our stories of the Awliya. We're going to read some stories of the Awliya. First, let me... hey, Omar, can I bother you to give me this pile of books here? I'm sorry to make you get up. Okay. All right, if you are in Dallas, we're going to... I'm going to be there. This is the book we're reading from, by the way. Let's put it here while I read this quick announcement. A couple quick housekeeping announcements. Strength and Sacrifice, Friday, May 24th. So firstly, at 1:45, there's the khutbah at SMS. I have no clue what SMS is, but it's a masjid, obviously. Then there is a family dhikr gathering at 6:30 p.m. Then there is youth night at ICI at 8:30 p.m. Then there is khatira at Epic at 10 p.m. So SMS, then the dhikr gathering is at someone's house. Then youth night is at ICI and khatira at Epic. Okay, so that's going to be this Friday. If you're in Dallas, you can come through to any of these events. Next thing we have, if you want to spend all summer, okay, all summer here at NBIC and with Safina Society, studying the Arabic intensive, attending nothing but facts, attending our dhikr circles, attending all our dinners and luncheons and everything. Feel free to come in. The tuition is basically nothing. It's $350. It's an Arabic program that runs 3 live classes a week on site and 1 online. Three live classes a week and 1 online. All of them are at night. All the live classes are at night. So you can come to the stream, you can come to our other events. You'll be very busy. And that's starting in the month of June. Right, towards the end of June. Okay, let's now read from the stories of the Awliya. Because a brother, they showed me a comment. A guy says, I got clickbaited. He said that the stories of the Awliya was only like 5 minutes at the end of the last episode. Okay, so in that case, we'll make it up to him by reading a little bit more than 10 minutes at the beginning here. We are reading from the Awliya of Morocco. Of all of these are from this generation, the Awliya of this generation. So to hear the quiet benefactor, Hajj Jalali of Meknes. Hajj Jalali of Meknes. And he was one of Sheikh Muhammad ibn al-Habib's closest companions. This air condition, I don't know what's going on with this air condition. Okay. So close that when he died, he was buried right beside the Sheikh in the Zawiya in Meknes. He was a merchant, and to purify his wealth, his Sheikh ordered him to feed 40 people a day for the rest of his life. Isn't that something? 40 people a day for the rest of his life because he was so wealthy. So to purify your wealth and to purify yourself, feed 40 people a day for the rest of your life. This he did without fanfare. In other words, people didn't know. And he had a table in, maybe it was in the Zawiya, and people, he says, the author says, we were guests there many times. He would always sit quietly to the side and make sure that we were well fed. And he had no interest, it would seem, he had no interest in the world. The Sheikh, it would seem, he says, that he had no interest in Hayat al-Dunya at all, although he was a very wealthy merchant. I'm telling you, there are some skills, if you have these skills, you literally cannot avoid wealth. I'm telling you. For example, if you're good at trading, you're going to become wealthy. If you're good at real estate, if you're a restaurant guy who has 50 restaurants, it's not so hard. You put the down payment, you build the whole thing up, and then you hire the right people to do it, and you take from that, $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a month, and you do that for 100 restaurants. Okay, over time, you build up all these restaurants. So it's some occupations you literally cannot avoid. You can't avoid being very wealthy, and you shouldn't even have to avoid it. Why should you avoid it? But if you look at how he reacted to it, it didn't increase his appetite for the worldly life. He then said, everything he did was for others. His many acts of generosity, most of them were unnoticed and unrecorded. What did not go unnoticed was his profound and almost heartbreaking sobriety, calmness, and serenity. He was so still. His face was like a deep ocean and a sea of peace. I find the two angels I captured of his beautiful face almost the two angles, he said, I captured of his face almost hypnotic. This is again Peter Sanders, the author. Just setting eyes on this quiet man of Allah was a cure for an ailing heart. And this is exactly one of the descriptions of the awliya. إِذَا رُؤُوا ذُكِرَ اللَّهِ. إِذَا رُؤُوا ذُكِرَ اللَّهِ. If they are seen, Allah is remembered. The next one is known as the guardian of the books. Imam Abdul Wahhab of Meknes, the guardian of the books. So the first one was a tajir, a businessman. The second one was an imam who had a massive library, and his name was Abdul Wahhab, imam of the Zawiya of Sheikh Muhammad ibn al-Habib. The Zawiya, what is a Zawiya? It's a sheikh has his own spot. And he has a place of prayer and a place of eating and place of sleeping and place for classes. It's his own area. And sometimes it's very big and sometimes it's tiny. Okay, but it's an area where he's in control. As opposed to the public mosque, which is for everybody, and maybe the state, the government runs it, has rights over it. Because every masjid, it's not just a free-for-all. There is an administrator to that masjid. And there is somebody who runs that masjid. So they have rights. They can remove who they want to remove. They can say no classes here. You can have class there. We're going to have a session here. We're not having anything at all. We're closing it right after Isha. People have to understand there are rights. They have the right to do that if they run the masjid and they see that's the benefit. What is the problematic is when sometimes these masajid may be taken over by state entities who don't want the flourishing of Islam. They don't want Islam to flourish. That's the difference. But they do, but by rights, yes, they have rights for that. He led the 5 prayers at the Zawiya, and he always gave discourses on the religious sciences, and he advised the fuqara on matters of the sacred law and the spiritual path. He was fastidious about his attire, and you could see very clearly here. Oh, you don't have that picture. Get that picture of the library if you can, because he's wearing this beautiful Moroccan thobe, all white, hood on his head, or it's a shawl on his a shawl on top of that, and a beautiful cape. That Moroccan style that is really, really something else. Very striking, especially when it's all white. Yeah. A subdued man. He lived a regulated and austere life, and his richness, his wealth, was in knowledge, and he had no desires for the worldly life. Between times of prayer and remembrance, he would retire alone to his humble room in the Zawiya, which had a small mattress on the floor and shelves of books that he would refer to. A confidant told me that he once sat beside Imam Abdul Wahhab as they had a meal together. The Imam, while smiling and clearly enjoying his food, kept repeating under his breath, Astaghfirullah, Astaghfirullah, Astaghfirullah. For most of us, when food appears, God disappears. And my friend realized that this wali remained continually in God's presence regardless of the circumstance. Are we allowed to say someone is a wali? When we say someone is a wali, we are allowed to say it ala sabil al-dhan. Ala sabil al-dhan, meaning in our estimation. Why? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave us signs of wilaya. Hadith Qudsi, the famous Hadith Qudsi, has signs of wilaya. So therefore, if we see those signs in people, we are allowed to assume he is a wali. But we are not allowed to say huwa wali ala sabil al-qata'. We're not allowed to say he is a wali, he is a man of Allah, okay, and someone who attained wilaya, with the intent of saying it with absoluteness. Right? That's the difference. When we say only Allah knows something, it means only Allah knows it absolutely. And we may attempt to know it and come to a conclusion which we know is speculative. Hence, in the tafsir of the muqatta'at, you do have Sahaba and early mufassirin giving their commentary about verses which we know only Allah knows the answer. So their commentary is ala sabil al-dhann, with the understanding that they're speculating. And it is permitted to have a speculation which you believe is very likely to be true. You just can't say it's absolutely true. Dhann does not mean it's doubtful. Dhann means you can have like a dhann that is rajah, a speculation that you feel very strongly about, very strongly that this is true. But I just can never say 100%. Just like when we start to try to put together a puzzle of events after the fact based on the evidence. You walk in the house, you see a cake eaten very sloppily, not cut. We can have a pretty strong suspicion that a child came and with his hand took from the cake. Pretty strong suspicion that happened. An adult would cut it with a knife. But can you say absolutely that happened? You can't say absolutely, but very, very likely that happened. So that's a very strong dhann. Then if you go down to 50-50, that's a shak. That's a shak. So you have dhann from 51% can go all the way to 99%. That's a big range. That is a huge range. But once you hit 50-50, that's a shak. When you go underneath it, that's a wahm. That's a wahm. Awham mean nothing, right? That's a wahm. And who had a wahm? Our old friend Imran Hossein, who was refuted all day yesterday from Jake Brancatella to Sheikh Israr Rashid, and both of them were correct. When our friend Imran Hossein, well, I'm not a friendly anymore. You can't be friendly with somebody who says these things. The Russian Orthodox are guided people. He says he's fallen in love with the Russian Orthodox these days. So he has this wahm. There's absolutely no basis for his theory that the Russian Orthodox are the inheritors of the Byzantine people who were that there's going to be an alliance between Muslims and them at the end of time. Whatever his theory is, it's a theory that is a wahm. And he's now taken that wahm. Now he has a problem because these people are kuffar. And the Ottomans fought the Byzantines. So he has a big problem with this. I'm not going to go into his theory, but this, because he has, his theory doesn't match with the clear texts and the ijma' that Ottoman people are Muslims, and they were the Muslim party, and they were the victors and the martyrs and the rightful in their battle with the Byzantines, Muhammad al-Fatih, the seventh Ottoman Sultan. So he has to make, I guess he makes a takfir of them, he did. Or a tabdiya of tafsiq of them or something, but then he refuses to hold the Russian Orthodox as non-believers. And that's just yet another insult to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and a type of perennialism where the first pillar, you're going to sacrifice the first pillar of Islam, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, for the sake of your theory? That's a wahm. Next subject. Now we go to another member of this group, this blessed group that was around the great Sheikh Muhammad ibn al-Habib. And this time we have the Munshid. We had the one who financed it all. We had the scholar, the faqih, and now we have the Munshid. They say, Al-Munshidu rub'u murshid. The Munshid, or some, I think maybe the saying is nisfu Munshid, murshid. The Munshid is like half of a murshid. A Munshid is a singer of religious songs that move the heart. A murshid is a spiritual guide. So what they say is that the one who sings these beautiful songs moves your heart. So he's almost, his value is like half of a spiritual guide who directs your heart. Directs your heart means teaches you the ways to purify your heart and get close to Allah. His name was Hamid or Hamid. I don't know. There's no diacritical, so I can't tell. He was the nightingale of the Zawiyah, raised from childhood by Sheikh Muhammad ibn al-Habib. He raised him. He grew up in an atmosphere of ibadah and dhikr. And he studied the Quran, and he had an amazing, ravishing voice, clear and incredibly sweet. He sat beside the Sheikh and he would recite passages of the Quran. And Sheikh Muhammad ibn al-Habib would give the tafsir. When the fuqara gathered to sing verses from the diwan is Sheikh Muhammad al-Habib, Sayyid Muhammad al-Habib's book of poetry, which is educational poetry. Sidi Hamid's voice soared above others, an outpouring of pure ecstasy. Okay, I found this on the web for how much is voice. Every time you say anything that sounds like Siri, it opens up. He earned his living as a civil servant. In other words, he worked in the city like a regular person. And as a result of that, he was clean shaven. And he dressed in a suit for work. So he was modern at that time. He was one of the first people to have to live this double life of part modern and part traditional. There was a time when people didn't do that. They were traditional through and through, but their modernity came in and forced people to have to adapt. Okay. But in the Zawiyah, he was his true self, and he would wear the traditional jalaba, and his voice was timeless, a rapturous expression of the oneness of Allah. And as a picture here, beautiful Zawiyah that they're in. Now let's go to the next one. Who is the next very, very important member of these gatherings? And any group always has one of these, which that is the one who takes care of the building. Okay, takes care of the building. And here, the Mawla Faqir Abd al-Salam, Muri Abd al-Salam, his name is. And he had a daunting and scary outward appearance due to an accident that occurred that altered his face. But he had a huge heart that overflowed with mercy. And he was also one of the regulars at the Zawiya of the Shaykh. One day I found him leaning against one of the pillars in the Zawiya, clutching his stomach in agony. But even in his terrible pain, all he saw was Allah's mercy, and he kept repeating, Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah ala kulli hal. The next one, let's put that picture up. You get to see what he's talking about. Look at these, the old world, subhanAllah. There's such a serenity in the old world. It's really sad that it disappeared. People my age may have caught a glimpse of it. People from the time of Peter Sanders and his colleagues caught a lot of it. People my age caught a spoonful maybe of it. But we caught it so young that as modernity washed through these places completely, altering them and washing away the old world, it's like a memory that you have to pull up now, unfortunately, for people like myself. The next one was Sidi Khalifa. And he would come to the Zawiya 5 times a day to make the call to prayer. So he was the mu'adhin. And he was blind. But he was always happy and content. The extent of his poverty in this world would shock most people. But he had a wealth in the next world that would amaze us all, meaning like a spiritual wealth in his heart. He was satisfied in his heart. Yeah. If you were to rely on God as he should be relied on, he would provide you as he provides for the birds who leave home hungry in the morning and return in the evening fed. That's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. And that was his state. He was completely dependent upon Allah. And again, in any group, you do find people who have this kind of, they represent for the group this zuhud. They represent zuhud for this, for the rest of the group. They suffer. Yeah, that's him. They suffer. They're the ones who receive the suffering. And when they do, though, number one, they give the rich a chance to do good deeds, the haves. But number two, when a person suffers, an attribute grows inside of his heart. A connection, a type of ma'rifah develops in his heart that others cannot handle. Others can't have that. A level of patience. So is the heart of the one who's suffering is not the same as the heart who is the one who has a lot and he gives and he fights and he struggles. Their hearts are different. One has to have a lot of sabr. The other may have more courage. One may have to have a lot of zuhud. The other may have to fight temptations. So their hearts are going to be different. The next one. There's no title here. I returned to Meknes in 2017 and was walking through the old town when I noticed a jalaba-clad blind gentleman walking towards me. Something about him reminded me of the Zawiya caretaker, Sidi Ali. In Morocco, Sidi is a word of respect. They use it for everybody like a mister. But I knew that he had passed away 9 months previously. Next, I thought of Sidi Khalifa, but was it possible? It was 45 years since I had photographed him. I raced after him to satisfy my curiosity. He was maneuvering himself unaided like a person with eyesight when he acknowledged that he was Sidi Khalifa. So that's why it's a continuation. He looks totally, not him. Yeah, that one, yeah. So he's the same person as the previous entry, but now 45 years passed. He was amazed. At the stately age of 84, with a daughter about to be married, he asked about many people from those early visits. God had crossed our paths again, so I took the opportunity to photograph him. He agreed to meet me in the Zawiya later, where he stood serenely as I took the new portraits. We lived such different lives, but for a few moments, I entered his world. And you could see his face there, having aged 45 years. I don't know. Next, we have the lost soul who became a man of the way. The way meaning the path of Allah. And I think we have to stop here because our guests are here. Today we're interviewing 3, or is it 2? Is it 2 or 3? Hold on. Let's turn your mic on. In a second, we'll turn your mic on. Okay, Samir, you want to stick your last name in there, if possible?
I need all 3 in so I can set up the...
Where is the third person? All right, we're setting up for our interview with the Princeton brothers. They have been the leaders of the... oh, here we are. Here we go. Good. Well done. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. We're going to put you on in a second. MashaAllah. Well done. Can you put your phone wide, David? Wide so that... If you can. If not, it's not a problem. If you can, it's not a problem. For those on Instagram, if you want to see the whole thing, come over to YouTube. Hop over to YouTube, Safina Saidi, and you get to see the whole picture. We have 3 members of Princeton who led the hunger strike. We're going to get an update from them on what's happening, what's the latest, how the graduation went, because we know that many universities canceled their graduation. So we're going to get the update from them. Yakov is here. You know, we do have an Israeli follower who attends and listens to everything here. He's a good guy. I don't know if is he a Muslim or he's a... Oh, I don't see the comments. Is his comments good? And he's saying hello, guys. So, okay. He's here to... listen genuinely or to bother us? Well, Yaakov, this concerns you because he says here he's a Jew. Well, this concerns you, so pay attention because this has to do with protesting Israel's genocide. I don't know if you would identify with Israel or not. I mean, why would you pin your religion to a government? They're just human beings, right? Who probably do a ton of bad things. In any event, here we go. Yaakov says, I emailed you. You never replied. I'll check the email. Okay. All right, we are on. Welcome. We have Arik Hassan. We have Samir Riyadh. And we have David. Welcome to the Safina Saidi Nothing But Facts live stream. I'm very pleased to have you all here. So you are from Princeton. Let's go clockwise. Let's go like the way we would do Tawaf. So we'll start with David first, bottom left corner, and then we'll go around to Samir and then to Arik. All right, David, let's go with the first question. Or give us the summary of your protest. When did it begin? Is it still going? When did it end? The causes, the purposes, etc.
Yeah, so our hunger strike was tied to the encampment at Princeton University, which started on April 25th. And it went for 21 days and then just recently wrapped up. We had a sort of big rally to mark Nakba Day, like the memorial of the Nakba. And then we sort of wrapped up the encampment there. And then our hunger strike had ended. Our hunger strike started the sort of, I believe it was like the Friday of like the first week of the encampment. And it kept going for about 12 days and then also wrapped up because we felt we had sort of made substantive progress on very much changing the conversation at Princeton University. In a lot of ways, like Palestine or even just activism in general was a thing that was very sort of underground on campus. It wasn't something that was very out in the open, but what we did with the encampment and sort of the hunger strike very much put it into the center of campus discourse in a way that, at least personally, I'm very sort of proud of.
Very good, very good. Let's turn now to Samir. Tell us, did you face any backlash from your advisors, your professors, your deans?
Yeah, I think actually more so than backlash, we were amazed at how much support we were getting from the community. The amount of people that just came out from all over New Jersey, it was incredible. Like, I don't think any of us were expecting it, and we were really surprised by the amount of people that were like overwhelmingly supportive of us. And I mean, as far as backlash goes, I wouldn't say. I think compared to the support, it was almost not noticeable. Especially directly from the community, from the faculty, and I think it was just like overwhelmingly positive. I think the people who actually came up to us, at least, obviously online, there's always people who are, saying whatever they're going to say. It's kind of impossible to not have backlash when you're kind of in the public. But I think the people who actually made an effort to like come see us in person, it was very positive. Like even there was very minimal counter protester presence even.
Very good, very good. Let's now go to Arik. Tell us the hunger strike. What were the terms that you were asking when you went on hunger strike, and did you receive any of the requests?
Certainly, of course. So we had two demands. The first was a meeting regarding disclosure, disassociation, and divestment of the university for its investments in Israel and the apartheid state of Israel. And two was essentially amnesty, both legal and so it was disciplinary and legal for the arrested students, both at the peaceful sit-in at Clio Hall and then also at the inception of the encampment. And with regards to the outcome, so alhamdulillah, we had a few meetings with the administration actually. I think the bargaining team had two meetings with them, and then we as hunger strikers had a meeting with them as well. And the sort of outcome of that meeting was actually just released. I think just yesterday, the students received amnesty, I guess were they unbarred from campus, is that right? So it wasn't amnesty, but I think they were unbarred from campus. And yeah, that decision just came out yesterday after a faculty meeting where by a slim margin, the faculty was able to push for a recommendation to grant amnesty to the students. So I think basically, yeah, the actual thing that happened is that they were unbanned from campus. So that was a win. And then also, of course, we had sort of three meetings with the administration. And so in that respect, both demands were met to some extent. Yeah.
So you were unbanned from campus, but wasn't the hunger strike on campus?
The hunger strike was on campus, that's right. So the students who were arrested weren't the hunger strikers. They were
arrested. Yeah. All right. And did they say that they agreed to at least have talks about the divestment?
So that's a good question. I think the idea regarding divestment is that they kept redirecting to like a committee called like the CPUC Resources Committee. And basically they kept citing sort of processes that are in place for us to pursue. But this is not really in line with past precedent where we were able to circumvent these processes for like the Black Justice League protests and other sort of precedents. So, but yeah, I don't think we were able to sort of circumvent the process, but we're still sort of actively pushing that front to see if we can, realize any change in that respect.
Okay, very good. So let's go swing down now to David. Explain the nature of the hunger strike. Is this a water fast, or what's the nature of the hunger strike? How many days did you end up? Was it you were in the heat for a couple days? How did it go?
Yeah, so the terms of the hunger strike were sort of based on the practices of like Palestinian political prisoners who have engaged in hunger strikes where they essentially just drink water and salt water. We sort of adapted that. We did water, but we also like had electrolyte packets that we also added to the water that we were drinking to sort of imitate that hydration effect of salt water, but in a slightly, more safe manner.
Yeah.
And then, so the hunger strike lasted in total for, I believe, like 12 or 13 days. But we had sort of people who like rotated through during that time. So for example, We had a good contingent of people who did 7 days and then broke just for their sort of like health reasons. I, for example, did like 9 days, and then we had a meeting with administration that we felt went well, so we broke after that. But then there were other people who kept going to sort of make sure that we actually got to the stage that Arik mentioned, where there was sort of this official announcement about the arrested students. So it was very much a sort of, I think Samir mentioned that we had a lot of community support, and it was very much like a sort of team effort in some sense, where people were, coming in as they could and then backing out when it was sort of called for their health reasons. And then, one other thing I'll mention is that we were very sort of, well supported, like medically, for example. There were like community doctors who were checking on us. And, that was sort of an interesting element of the hunger strike, because we were conscious of the fact that we were very supported in a way that a lot of the people in Gaza are like not. Like, they're going through famine and they don't have this sort of medical infrastructure. So I think it was also a very sort of humbling experience for a lot of us, reminding us that, we were doing this gesture in solidarity with the Palestinian people, but we still can't really comprehend the sort of extent of the suffering that they're facing.
So your inspiration for the hunger strike was the hunger of the people of Gaza, and now that are Rafah or in camps that, or they're not in hunger strike, they're in pure just hunger because of the lack of resources. So I have a follow-up question to that is, so you went on a basically 7-day hunger strike. Tell us about that physically. How did that affect your ability to think, your ability to just to be alert, all that? Because I could tell you personally, I don't have experience with anything close to that. So I'm curious how to go physically.
I think there was a really wide range of experiences for the people involved. And I think in part the sort of, there's a really like certain people had more severe like medical consequences. And a lot of that in part was the result of the actions of the university. The university sort of refused to allow us to like set up shelters for the hunger strikers to stay in, even when there were several days where it was very cold and rainy and like windy. And they literally just refused to like even acknowledge the possibility that like tents would be helpful. And they sort of actively took down like tarps that people set up so that hunger strikers could, be protected from the rain. Because, the goal was for us to be visible and sort of out there at the encampment all the time. But that the university intentionally made that very difficult and more dangerous to our health than it needed to be. So, we had like, for example, a hunger striker who went to the hospital. And we had other people who sort of had like more severe weight loss and symptoms. But then, others among us, like, I mean, personally, I like felt not that bad throughout the entire thing, alhamdulillah. And I think in part that was the result of, something Samir mentioned, like the sort of level of support that we were getting from community in many ways was like more energizing than any food ever could be. So I think morale was very high, even if physically there was sort of a wide range of symptoms that were on display.
Okay, I have one more question on the protest, then I want to talk about ideological things. So, Samir, do you think that the end of the school year sort of helped all these universities? The fact that all these protests came towards the last few weeks of school.
It's interesting. I think in some ways it helped them, but it also helped us in many ways because universities, graduation for universities is like a big point of leverage that we had over them. So Princeton's graduation is actually quite late. The graduation hasn't even happened. It's a week from today, May 28th. So other universities where the graduation is much closer to the end of classes and the end of finals, I think it definitely, I'd imagine at least, it served as like a major point of leverage for them, where universities, I think part of the reason you're seeing this like intense police response is because they were so worried about the way students are openly protesting and making this visible, making the issue of Palestine visible, and making the ongoing genocide visible. It was so problematic for universities because they have all these alumni and parents coming during graduation. So I think obviously there's the element of like students are leaving campus, but at the same time, there's kind of this competing clock of graduation that the universities have. And reunions for most universities tend to be around this time as well. I mean, that's especially bad.
Okay. Now, permit me now to shift from strategy, which is what you all were engaged in, and thought. Okay. Thought involves like the philosophy behind an activist movement. And you're all from Princeton, so I'm sure you're very thoughtful about this, is that when a lot of Muslims went to encampments, a lot of people who maybe were not fully aware of the nature of the activist world, they were a bit surprised by the nature of the of a lot of protests, namely that there was a nationalistic vibe to a lot of them, maybe even a Marxist type of attitude towards the powerful, that they were a bit taken aback by. So tell me where are your thoughts regarding the nature of the activist crowd, as some people like to put it, and I don't want to say that in any condescending way, but the thought of activists, is it rooted in a type of nationalistic, socialistic type of secular approach, or is it rooted in a religious theology? Or do you think people don't really care for either of that? They're not even thinking that deeply, and they're just protesting what they see in this on the news. So we'll go to Arik for his first thoughts. I'd like to hear all your thoughts on this.
Yeah, that's a really interesting observation. I think, okay, so for one, I think part of the beauty of this is that it's very inhomogeneous. Like, we have a very classic example is that we're building sort of like a microcosm of the society that we want to see. And so we'll see, for example, we had our Jumu'ah service, and then at night, the Jews had their Shabbat service, and all in the same sort of area. So the ideologies are definitely there are many different, different groups of people here with very different worldviews and perspectives. But I think we're all what unites us is the fact that we're aligned for the cause of justice. And, we're here to stand up against oppression. And so I think for that reason, we're able to sort of, actually, not really care about these differences and really try and focus on the unity that we need in order to further the cause, right? And I think that's reflected also in the programming. It's not just for example, David, would lead these dua that we would do after each, of the Fard Salah. And this was sort of our way of, engaging with, engaging with the cause. And then all of these different sort of groups would have their own sort of things in the programming sequence where they would, do things in their own way. So yeah, basically, my underlying point is that it's not homogenous, and I think that's beautiful. I think, the fact that there were these differences, but we're united under this single cause.
And I think the having a heterogeneous group, everyone is able to say something different. In other words, there are certain things Jewish students can say they're not going to get in trouble for that a Palestinian student cannot say, as an example.
Right.
All right, David, your thoughts on this concept of the heterogeneous nature of the underlying thought and beliefs of the different protesters?
Yeah, I mean, I think something that's really interesting to think about as well is at least something that I experienced at the encampment was that I think there was, even if people wouldn't necessarily articulate it through the lens of something religious, there's definitely a very sort of spiritual energy at the encampment, I think. I remember at one point, one of the administrators from the Office of Religious Life came over to me and Arik when we were sitting in the hunger strikers area, and he was like, it feels like a monastery over here. He was
Wow.
there's definitely this very sort of I think, yeah, I guess spiritual or maybe poetic is the right word for it. And so I think something that's interesting about the encampment as an experience is that, as Arik sort of alluded to, a lot of the people there were there because they sort of had these visions of what they want, a more just world to look like, or a more equitable world to look like. And I think what's interesting to me is that in many ways, those visions aren't really secular because they're sort of referring to these sort of ways of making meaning that sort of exceed secular or materialist understandings of the world. And, this is sort of a more long-standing academic debate that I'm interested in. There have been debates over Fanon, for example, and sort of decolonial theory, and whether decolonial theory sort of has this spiritual dimension to it, because it's very much gesturing towards this idea of another world beyond empire and beyond imperialism. And there's sort of a very otherworldly quality to that isn't necessarily articulated in the same way that a religious person would, but there's definitely something there. And I think this is one of the most interesting parts of the encampment experience is encountering people who are, not Muslim, but they almost articulate things in a way that feels very Muslim. And so that was sort of an interesting, unique part of the experience. This sort of idea of us all coming together around an almost collective meaning-making project, which in many ways religion is also a meaning-making project.
Very good. Beautiful. Next, Samir, your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I think it's interesting. We talked to a lot of people a lot of community members who are a lot older than us, who are reflecting on their experiences with issues that maybe Muslims exclusively might have cared about in the past. So, for example, like the Bosnian genocide, they would talk about how, there wasn't really these type of movements during that time, or like post 9/11, or in any previous kind of tragedy that's occurred in Palestine. There even when there were protests, it tended to be like a very small group of people, and they didn't really experience a lot of like non-Muslim support in those moments. And now when you look at these protests that are occurring in solidarity with what's happening in Gaza, it's like it's a completely different world compared to what they were experiencing, and the way they described the world around them. And I think it's important that we highlight the kind of diversity that Arik was talking about as like a major strength and development in what's been going on. It's really, really been beneficial that not everybody in these protests are the same types of people. Yet they're all able to sort of see the true nature of the injustice that's unfolding. And I think trying to paint in broad strokes why all those people are seeing that injustice as anything but the fact that they see the truth in what's happening, like saying that, oh, well, it's because they all share this some particular ideology. I wouldn't say they necessarily do. I would say that they're all, as you put it, they're seeing what's happening on the news, and they see that there's a grave injustice unfolding. And I think people also understand it not just as an injustice that's happening in Palestine, but as something that is emblematic of injustices that are happening all around the world and that have been happening. So we've had teach-ins where people come and they connect what's happening to things that are occurring in Korea, things that are occurring in Kashmir, things that are occurring in Sudan and the Congo. And so there's like a lot of intersectionality about systems of oppression throughout the world. And I think that's actually been a very immense strength and a very empowering part of what we've been experiencing.
When you have a lot of diverse thoughts all agreeing on something, chances are that it is a clear and gross oppression. Whereas if you only had one group of people holding something to be an oppression, then yeah, it may be an oppression in their view, as opposed to something where everyone seems to have like a type of ijma' that what's happening here can't be right. Even if you don't have any set of ideology, which most people don't have a clearly defined belief system in their life. They just sort of living without that. And they're coming out against this too. Let me ask this now. Again, we'll go around the clock. How far are we from the feeling that taking Israeli money or taking AIPAC money is something taboo? Are Americans 10 years from that, 50 years from that, 20 years from that? Where do you think we're headed? Will it ever happen that universities would find it to be taboo to have ties with the University of Israel, or politicians would feel like I'm going to lose? It's going to be a big headache if people find out I'm taking AIPAC money, so I'm just going to stay away from that. Where do you think we're headed with that?
Yeah. Okay. So I think, of course, you see this sort of, we're college students right now, and you see sort of like the fact that this is happening all over the country and all around the world. So if you just imagine, in 10 years when each of us are in, moving towards positions of power, this will reflect the general consensus by nature of, us being the future of the, the world in some sense, right? So I could imagine very easily that within the next 10 years or so, and of course, this is, and this is just the way that I see it, but also I've also been I've been in a bubble of I've been at an encampment for 2 weeks. So my perception of the world is probably very biased right now. But yeah, I don't know. I could imagine very easily in 10 years when these people are in the workforce and in the world, actually realizing, or not to say they're not realizing change right now, but yeah, that could be a very natural sort of time scale. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
David?
Yeah, I think one of the remarkable things about the encampment for me as well was the way it brought in a lot of people who I wouldn't have expected to like be there, essentially. Like people who I knew on campus who sort of had vaguely like liberal or leftist politics, but who I didn't know actually like would be willing to do anything tangible about this cause specifically. And so my sort of hope for where the movement goes from here is that for a lot of people now, like Palestine is an issue that they like think about critically and is sort of at the front of their mind in a way that it may not have been previously. So I think just to echo sort of Arik's point, like I'm very hopeful about like our current like generation. I think polling suggests that like our generation is quite, you know, by a good margin, like the most sort of pro-Palestinian generation in America. And I hope that will only sort of increase as people sort of come to view Palestine as like an important cause through things like this encampment. Like I genuinely do believe that like this woke a lot of people up and it sort of put Palestine into the center of the discourse in a way that it hasn't been previously. You know, like something Samir mentioned that community members have also mentioned to us is like, you know, they really like like this kind of things that we're chanting, like from the river to the sea, like it was sort of unimaginable like 10 or even, you know, 20 years ago, like for these to be things that like college students are like openly sort of saying and embracing. So I think there's a way that like the overtone window has shifted very rapidly. And if we keep pushing, you know, inshallah, that'll continue to sort of be the case.
Very good. Very good. Samir?
Yeah. So if you think about the example of boycotting Starbucks, where, you know, boycotting Starbucks in practice probably doesn't make a huge dent in Starbucks's, you know, financial profits or their ability to operate as a business. But like really what it has done is now, you know, when somebody goes to buy a cup of coffee, they have to think about the fact that there's a genocide occurring. And they have to think about the fact that even in buying a cup of coffee, I'm now implicated in this genocide. Or it's possible to be implicated in this genocide, which is not something that people were really conscious of before. And I think what this movement has done is it has done exactly like that kind of, the effect of boycotting Starbucks, it's kind of put that everywhere. I think it's not possible to, you know, kind of affiliate yourself with Israel now without at least thinking about it. Even if, you know, there are people who are Zionists and they decide, I don't care, I'm like, down with the Israeli government, it's impossible to just like accept that relations with this country is just a normal thing, like relationship with any other country. I think it's becoming increasingly difficult to maintain that position. Mm-hmm. And I mean, like Arik said, we've been in like a pretty like pro-Palestine space for like the past 3 weeks, so it's hard to say in like an unbiased way, like how are things truly shifting. But I think based on, you know, all of the people that we've talked to, it's at the very least, like it's impossible not to think about these things. And like David's been saying, the overturn window has most definitely shifted. Just the fact that we're able to even have these protests at this scale is a sign of that.
Well, people, when students were going for the divestment and people were saying, oh, there's no point. There's no way these universities who has multi-million-dollar deals like Rutgers has a huge center going up that's between them and University of Israel or Tel Aviv University, one of these. But the point was that by making such a big, bold claim, you get people's attention. The true success is altering the culture of what you all have said, basically, that this is now like normal speak. This is now the language of justice is now to care about Palestine. People are now keeping track of who said what, and change doesn't happen immediately. In the financial element, the financial is usually the last. The cultural comes first. You change the culture. You alter what people perceive, what the common person perceives. Then bigger businesses will have to start to think twice. We saw this last June when there were massive drops in the stock of Target and Bud Light, because of how much they pushed certain agendas that bothered families and bothered mothers and bothered fathers, that they pulled back. And we saw Major League Baseball, National Hockey League, all these banned all sorts of political statements. Why? Because the culture changed. And that's really what these protests are doing. Because when you put yourself out there in public and you have something dramatic like a hunger strike, nobody can not cover that. Media has to cover that. People are going to see it. And so you change the culture. You get in people's heads and you change the culture very slowly. Now, my next question. We know for sure that AIPAC is working 24/7. All these other groups that they have 24/7 to support their cause and to fight for their cause. These protests seem to have come. Yes, maybe there were some people who were activists before this and they put it in high gear. Many other people for the first time did anything like this. They don't know how it works, what the language is, how does this stuff work? So my question is now, how do you plan to keep this up? So it can't just stop here and everyone packs up and goes home, because the other side is going to be building up their agenda and working 24 hours a day to ensure something like this doesn't happen again. So we can't be basically let the energy go down to a zero, and then when something happens, start up again, we'll be starting up from zero again. So how do we keep this up going forward? What kind of physical actions can the regular person do to keep the momentum going? All right, let's start with, let's go with Arik. We'll keep going around the clock. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really great question. Yeah. I think I've also been very actively reflecting on this myself. I think, so I mean, there are two things. I mean, there's sort of like the general advice you can give to like, you know, the everyday person of like what they can do. But then there's also like, you know, like as a Muslim, right? Like I need to actively reflect on the risk that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has willed for me. And then think about like, you know, the specific things that he's given me. Like I need to think about like how it is that I can use that to serve his cause, right? To stand up for justice, to command right and forbid wrong. Right. So I think that reflection, I think, is a very big piece that maybe people have not been thinking about as much. Like I think the protests, these sort of massive acts of unity are very important. But I think that this needs to be sort of balanced with sort of like very actively thinking about like, you know, what are the camels that I am the Lord of, right? Like what is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala given me that I need to now like think about how I can use it to serve his cause. So that is something that I think we need to think about, like reflecting on that. And then also, I think just in general, like sort of like continuing the BDS movement, and this, as Samir was referring to, like this idea of ethical consumerism, and to like thinking about like how my economic decisions have, you know, like moral ramifications. I think can really like pushing on that. I think yeah, that can be another big component of it too. But yeah, this is definitely something that I'm also thinking of very actively.
Yeah.
And I don't really have answers. So
yeah. You know, in Islam, you keep your iman up because the Sunnah, the Sharia gives you little things that you do, little and big things that you do every single day. Like you cannot forget Allah. Even when you go to the bathroom at 3 a.m, there's a Sunnah. Go in with your left foot, right? Use your left hand. Wash your hands. Come out with your right foot. And there's a dua. So at 3 a.m, you're bumbling your way to the bathroom. There's like 5 little touch points that basically keep the oil dripping in the engine of that iman, even at 3 a.m. We need like something like this that everyone could do. So middle class people just stop drinking Starbucks, right? That's something that they could do. Every day they drink coffee, they buy coffee. At least that's something they could do. It doesn't even have to be, it could be tangentially related, but this keeps the spirit alive, you know? Dave, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'll just pick up on one particular aspect I think will be really important, you know, because like part of the sort of work that AIPAC and other sort of Zionist organizations do is they're sort of consistently pushing a narrative, and they've been very effective at that for a long time, where they're sort of trying to make people think that their sort of framing of the problem is the only way to think about Palestine. Mm-hmm. And, you know, especially one thing that they try to do is just erase the existence of Palestinians in the first place. Like they try to make it seem as if this is like an empty land, and, you know, sort of like Zionist settlers just came in and sort of, you know, took over an empty place. So I think, you know, one of the number one things that we can do to sort of break that logic and expose its falsehood is just insist on Palestinian presence. And, you know, one way we can do that, and I think it goes back to what Arik was mentioning about what was happening at the encampment, is just consistent education. Like when you have the time, read Palestinian poetry, look at Palestinian art, you know, read Palestinian literature, read scholars like Edward Said, you know, other sort of like Palestinian writers, so that when it comes to like the sort of narrative that gets pushed in like the broader, culture, you have the tools to resist that for yourself. And also just like in one-on-one conversations with people, that's a very effective way of sort of changing the culture. If you can actually respond to these things when people bring them up in your personal life. So that's the sort of thing that I would mention is like, how do we sort of sustain a movement? It's making sure that people take the steps to get educated so that these things don't leave their mind and so that they always have these talking points ready. And that'll be, a really crucial thing. And I think that's an infrastructure that we're developing, like more and more people are starting to study this issue and understand the sort of real history of the region. And that will be very effective in making sure that there's like a large group of people who can push back against the sort of Zionist lies that are very prominent in the media.
You notice that things that you said, tell the story over and over, read, talk to people. We have the same thing with knowledge, right? The Quran, everything. But we have Ramadan. Allah gave us Ramadan. Ramadan is a month. No matter, everyone stops what they're doing and they recite Quran, right? You know what amazing thing that you guys could do is, what was the darkest moment of the whole period of time from October until now? That should be a month. And it should have a name in which everyone tells the story. Because on the one hand, people say, no, we should tell the story all the time, not limit it to 1 month. Yes, but that 1 month does so much. When you concentrate everything into 1 month, everyone has a month, right? Why shouldn't the Palestinians have a month? And what would the name of that month be? And the goal of the month is to tell the story of the Nakba of 1948, then to tell the story of this, and to tell all the stories. And also, it's a chance to answer back to all these other ridiculous claims, like there are no such thing as Palestinian people, or that the land was empty, or that, or even just the origin of how this Nakba happened. What legal authority gave them? What gave them the authority to settle here in the first place? And was that a valid authority? And the repetition of that. So let me start by asking Samir, what do you think of this odd concept that there needs to be a month? Like, human psychology operates this way, where going forward, we'll never forget this. We'll never forget all the other things that led up to it. And schools, we should push it. It should be pushed in public schools. It should be pushed in Islamic schools. And every Muslim should give life to this story and retell the story right in this month, whatever month that is really the darkest day where this happened. What do you think of that idea, Samir?
I mean, there's a lot of weight to it. I think our constant retelling and re-emphasizing of this erasure of Palestinians is this is what kind of keeps this movement alive. Mm-hmm. I think one time me and David were discussing this idea of we cannot forget. I mean, we weren't just discussing this. This is something we've mentioned time and time again in like our du'as and just repeatedly just in our discussions in like halakas at the encampment, which is that we need to make sure that we do not forget the pain that is being experienced by the Palestinians. It's not like this is something that goes away. There are wounds, and wounds can heal, but kind of forgetting the pain that brought about those wounds is what kind of allows you to get hurt again. And so the idea of constantly like reminding ourselves of these stories is important. As for like a month in particular, I always worry about like, for example, if you look at like Martin Luther King Day, like how many people are like truly honoring the legacy of Martin Luther King? Like, we have it as like a federal holiday, but at the same time we see like a pretty wild suppression of student protests by our own government, like people trying to pass bills and all of this. So I mean, there's not like I wouldn't say that officially declaring it at a certain time is necessarily going to solve like this or solve this idea, this issue of storytelling. But I think it's just the sentiment of like we need to be regularly reminding ourselves of this is very important. And I mean, it's something that we already do in many ways. Islam is a tradition that I mean, in many ways we are telling the same stories over and over again and extracting more and more lessons from them every time and applying those to the modern day. Like that is the essence of our tradition, is retelling these stories that are in the Quran and in the Sunnah and of like the righteous predecessors.
Another thing, if any of you are in the legal field, wouldn't a lot of Palestinians qualify for luju siyasi, political asylum? And if so, I mean, political asylum being fought, right? And being in danger by your own government. Wouldn't that be an action that people could take? Is helping them apply for political asylum? It takes a lot of effort for sure. But is it a valid idea? Is it a crazy idea? Let's go over now to Arik.
I think, okay, honestly, I think David is very well equipped to answer this question, seeing as though he's going in the legal field. So
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the exact legal particulars, but yeah, I am technically headed off to law school. But I think there definitely are like amazing organizations that are sort of doing work to try and support Palestinian rights, like through the U.S. legal system. I know Palestine Legal is one example. Other examples are like the Center for Constitutional Rights and like CARE, sort of supporting activists like in the U.S. doing this work. So there certainly is like a degree of like legal maneuvering to be done. But I think also what's sort of interesting, this idea of like, for a lot of Palestinians, I think they wouldn't want to sort of leave their land. And I think that's sort of always like a complicated question is like, how do we sort of, work from over here, but still center like what Palestinians want and like what they're sort of looking for in their liberation movement? Because I think, the idea of sort of like asylum or like leaving for a lot of Palestinians is like something that they just like completely reject. And I think, those sort of conversations about like diaspora and exile have been playing out among Palestinians since the Nakba. And that sort of conversation feels like it's internal to their community as opposed to something that we as activists would decide. And I think our sort of role is to like support what they think is best for the future of their people.
Yeah, we definitely won't be deciding for them or even suggesting it, but I can imagine that there are some who need to have who want to move on, and that option should be explored for them. And the fact that we have Palestinians already here, it would indicate that, right? So post Nakba, you saw on AJ Plus, one of our locals who you really like 2 miles from Princeton, Dawood Asad, Hajj Dawood Asad, was profiled. And he has stories directly in the Nakba that his uncles were shot right in front of him. And his family was woken up in the middle of the night and they all just left. They just were driven, I believe he said west. They were shooting from north, south, and east, so that forced him to go west. But you're right 100% that it's really their choice, and that a lot of them feel that leaving is a capitulation, or that leaving is almost sort of doing exactly what Israel wants. And we actually saw this, if you remember, pretty early on. All of a sudden, one of the talking points was, we'll take Palestinians in, we'll take people from Gaza in. And it was like the right wingers were saying this, and it was like, hold on a second, why are you saying this? You're saying this because that's what they want. They want them to be completely to leave. Then there will be no claim to the land afterwards. All right, let's now turn to closing remarks. Anything that you want to say, Bab Jama, anything that is related or tangentially related to what you discussed that you feel that you want listeners to hear. Let's go down with Samir and then go around the clock again.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of go back to one of the questions you asked about what can the average person do.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, we've been talking about how this kind of like normalization that's been occurring, and part of that normalization is hand in hand with kind of the nature of the injustice increasing. So really what's happening is the material stakes for speaking out against injustice are decreasing, and the spiritual stake is becoming higher. Meaning like the risk that you put yourself at is less, and the importance of it is greater than any time before. And so I think that kind of rebalancing of the equation should prompt everybody to think that whatever I've been doing so far, I need to be doing more than that now. And I mean, that's going to look different for every person. But I think that is like ultimately what the whole idea of normalization of talking about this genocide, normalizing the ability to speak out against it, that is what it's for. It is for the people who felt like they couldn't do something before to think again, what can I do now? Now that I have this kind of greater opportunity and a greater obligation to do so, and how can I like factor that into my life now? And so I think that's kind of the way people should be considering this equation in terms of, you know, what can I be doing further? Yeah, I guess I'll leave it there.
Very good, very good. So in summary, everyone's got to increase their output of action for this cause a little bit, whatever it is. Whatever it was, you got to increase it, which mostly for most people was sentiment only. Just ideas, thoughts, maybe sympathies. Now we move to action. And it needs to be a habit. In order for things to really be big, they need to be habits. And habits need to be small and at set times. Rather than free float. You guys know, like, how do you study? You just free float study. No, there's got to be a time to study. There's got to be an amount to study. And it needs to become a routine. And that's how you build one layer over another. So those are my 2 cents on how to effect action, rather than just have the idea of action, but how do we make it actually happen? Let's go to, and this how does Allah draw us near to him? He doesn't say pray whenever you feel, whenever you can. No, there's a set time for prayer. There's a window, right? And there's an amount too. Dhuhr 4 rakas, no more than 5. No more. No 5. No 3. Fasting. There's a time to fast. Okay, so let's go to Arik. What do you think? Any closing statements that you want the audience to hear?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important thing, I mean, so one was sort of what I alluded to earlier, of this idea of like trying to really deeply reflect on like what is the risk that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given me and how can I use that to serve his cause. Another is, in order to do that, I think it's very important to empathize like strongly with the examples. You know, our tradition is rich with, in many senses, like the prophetic sort of, the prophetic mission is deeply related to this idea of establishing justice and fighting fasad, corruption in the land. One of sort of the inspirations that I have, like for, you know, the hunger strike and these protests in general, is the example of Musa alayhi salam. You know, the dua, Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli, like thinking about like how can I speak up, and then also this idea of like reflecting on, you know, each of the prophetic missions, they sort of leverage the zeitgeist, right, like the spirit of the time, and their miracles were related to this. You know, you have yeah, I mean, the Quran, like this sort of like time when like language and poetry was really important, and you have like Isa alayhi salam's like sort of medicine and healing and these sorts of things. So thinking about what is the spirit of the time, what is the medium that people are listening to, and then thinking about like how can we sort of spread the message of truth and justice through the medium of the time, not trying to like, yeah, so sort of just reflecting on that, but basically just turning to the examples that are in our tradition, which is rich with examples of what it looks like to stand up for justice.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. The medium of our time is shorts, really. If that's what you meant by medium, like the physical medium that people use are 30-second little clips, and that's why Propaganda & Co. had a couple of those. They were fire. I mean, people don't really have time for an hour-long lecture, but clips are really one of the mediums. And where are youth today? If you want the future, go where the youth are. And there was one scholar who was asked, why doesn't he use technology that Allah gave him? Why he's not on social media, etc. He said, I fear to do something that none of my teachers had precedent in doing, and could mess it up. So then they asked his colleague, who is on every medium, and he answered and said that I fear that Allah will say, I gave you all these opportunities and you never took them. Right? So the other side's reaching everybody through far bigger medium that we'll ever have. Through Hollywood. Every month now there's another Holocaust movie coming out to make sure they drill it in our heads and remind us of the sympathy factor. And I'm sure that we're going to start seeing in the coming year and 2 years all the documentaries. And I think the more simple laptop-based documentaries that are going to come out with all the footage from Gaza are going to be far more powerful, because there'll be grassroots, right? Documentaries. And that's great work for anyone who's in media to start putting together these documentaries. And a good documentarian could really change a lot of perception and reach a lot of people. All right, very good. So, David, final word.
Yeah, I mean, it's very connected to what you just mentioned, like this idea of documentary, and I think, also just going back to the idea of like a Palestinian month, or sort of, what it means to sort of memorialize the Nakba. I think something, as Samir mentioned, something that we've been thinking a lot about is the idea of memory. Both because like remembrance is obviously such a central part of the Islamic tradition, and I think when it comes to how we think about what we're seeing in terms of people being martyred, a sort of crucial element of like martyrdom in the Islamic tradition is that the sort of, the root word of shaheed both is martyr, but also witness. So, Islamic thinkers have talked about how there's this connection between the idea of martyrdom and being a witness to the truth, or sort of, your life having this transcendent quality where it's not just about your individual death. Your death becomes about this sort of collective process of memory and, striving for justice. And so I think that's sort of a crucial thing that we need to be thinking about is like, how will we sort of honor the sacrifices of our martyrs? How will we sort of honor their memories? I think that's a crucial thing. And what will take from us, as you mentioned, is a sort of a habit of, remembering the pain of the people of Palestine and sort of feeling that pain as we're commanded to feel the pain of the ummah. And sort of sitting with those negative feelings and realizing that we're given those negative feelings for a specific reason, that there's sort of a power to mourning, there's a power to grief. And we see this in our tradition, right? Like there's beautiful examples of like the Prophet ﷺ, like mourning Khadijah, or mourning the loss of his son Ibrahim. So we can sort of learn from this idea of like being motivated by grief, I think, and sort of sitting with the memories of what's happening, and allowing that to sort of, compel us to be better servants of Allah and better servants striving for justice. I think that would be the sort of number one theme I emphasize is like, we need to be sort of thinking about the negative feelings as being given to us for a reason to sort of motivate us to do more.
That's a great sentiment. And also these martyrs, one of the best ways to honor their sacrifice, they left loved ones who can tell their story. So I'm within 1 to 2 years, if and hopefully things settle, who knows how they'll settle down, but people can now interact with them and get the story of what happened to your mother. Like, what was the last day like with your mother? Like, how did she die? Who did she save? And you're going to hear stories that are just amazing. And because we already are seeing them. And this is without any organized attempt. And I think a lot of people will fund these documentaries. If there's a good documentarian, to go out there, spend a year researching, interviewing people, putting together the story of so many people who have died that hopefully they can die without their story going untold. They will have died. Hopefully millions upon millions upon millions will hear the narration about how they died, who they were saving, how they were living, who were they? Like we have to put a picture to, like one of you said that AIPAC is always telling a story, right? Like, who are the people of Gaza? These were regular people who went shopping, who played soccer, who watched movies, who raised families. Like, those stories have to be told. And hopefully going forward, we've talked about a lot of different things that can be done to continue this juice, to keep this machine oiled, so that the next time something big happens, we have momentum and we're not flat-footed. I think on October 7th, all of us were flat-footed. All right. A lot of us were flat. No one expected that we're going to be called to talk about this, to do something, to do anything. So hopefully the next time around that we have to defend and speak out, we'll have made a runway. These documentaries form a runway. These encampments are forming a runway where people now have a memory. People now have a precedent. You guys have set a precedent of this is what works. This is how to do it. We've done it before. There's like a muscle memory to it now. So may Allah reward all your work and continue inspiring you with your sacrifice, and all of those colleagues of yours and classmates that helped you, and all those around the entire country, the university, entire country that did this. And there were some notable universities that made a lot of headlines, and there were some that probably put in tons of work without getting any headlines. So, but nonetheless, Allah sees, and we ask Allah Ta'ala to give you success in the future. Thank you guys so much for coming on. Anytime that you want to come on, that you want to share something, you have a development, you have an idea, you just contact Omar, and inshallah, I'd love to have you guys back on. All right. Jazakumullah khairan. Thank you all very much.
Thank you for having us. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Alaikum salam. Jazakumullah khairan. There you have it, folks. We have to keep it up, and we need the story of the Nakba should be told religiously. When I say religiously, I mean like as a wird. We know how to get things done in our religion because we have the concept of awrad. Start very small, but hit it every day. The wird is something that you do every morning, every evening. In addition to your prayer, your 5 prayers, it keeps you remembering Allah constantly, nonstop. But it's so small that you can't forget it. You can't miss it. So short, 5 minutes. So what our path has taught us, our spiritual path has taught us, is how to effect a change in yourself. An effective change may start off as a big momentous moment, like the death of someone changed you. Loss of a job changed you. Terrible sickness changed you. But after that, you don't want to fall down again. You need something to keep little bits, a drop of oil, drop of motor oil to keep that motor going, to keep that engine running. And that's really what we need here. Okay. All right. So that concludes that segment. Let us now turn to the Q&A for today. Today's the first stream of the week. So we want to have a Q&A. We have a few minutes for a Q&A. All right, let's go. Bismillah. Jake Brancatella's refutation of the Ash'a'ira. Do you know how many people have refuted the Ash'a'ira or attempted to refute the Ash'a'ira before? And Jake is a colleague. I mean, I just texted him yesterday. He sent me his video on Sheikh Imran Hossein. He texted it to me, and we talked about it, and I agreed with him in terms of that. And from the differences of opinion is whether or not somebody can say someone is a kafir. In the Maliki school, there is a statement that if someone openly does kufr in front of you, then what you may do is say that this person is now a kafir. What you may not do is execute the hudud upon him. That's what you may not do. I believe in the Hanafi school is slightly different, that you cannot even say that this person is a kafir. Only a judge can do that, because he would then ask, were the conditions met? Did he say it intentionally? Did he do that, this, that, and the other? So FYI, there are 2 opinions on this. Yeah, and let's be realistic. If you see a guy go up to the Buddha or to some Hindu idol and prostrate himself, are we going to say, no, we have to make tawaqquf and leave it to a qadi? Or is it right? It's right in front of you. What if he says something? What if the person literally right in front of you says, it's not necessary to believe in the Prophet, peace be upon him? Are we going to say, well, no, he's still a Muslim and we have to make tawaqquf and only a judge can do that? So I'll get you the direct quote on that, but I am telling you that this was discussed by myself and some other students of knowledge with ulama who said, yes, if it is sarih, right in front of you, then what you may not do is execute anything. There are lawazim by Sharia that would occur. For example, this person's marriage would be nullified right on the spot. The inheritance would be nullified. So that you may not, you have no power to do anything like that. Of course, the person would have istitaba. You can't kidnap the person, put him in a basement for 3 days and lock him up and give him istitaba for 3 days. Those things you cannot do. But in any event, it's not something that anyone should run around doing, but there are some daruriyat ad-din. Al-ma'loom min ad-din bil-darura. Does not take a alim to see that this person has contradicted them. Okay. But anyway, I didn't see his refutation of the Ash'a'ira. Send it over. Do you know what he's talking about? This person is the questioner is saying that...
Seems to be older, I think, older.
Yeah, I mean, it's old. Okay, so it's nothing recent. But, I mean, that's what's going to be happening. That's what they do all day long, and we do the opposite all day long. But anyway, I don't think there's much value in going too much into these things. Like, we already go a lot into this. This podcast, this live stream is like and this organization it promotes the Ash'ari Aqidah. It promotes the Maturidi Aqidah. As they say in Arabic, like quh, a purist. But the Hanbali Aqidah is also a valid Aqidah, which we would accept, and we have lessons on it. If you want lessons on the Hanbali Aqidah, 12 lessons in Hanbali Aqidah, go to arcview.org, and we have it with Sheikh Yusuf ibn Sadiq. That we promote. We don't promote the Taymiyyah Aqidah. We promote the Hanbali Aqidah. And there are differences, big differences, according to Sheikh Yusuf bin Sadiq in those lessons, which I attended that class, listened to the whole thing. Intro to Hanbali Aqidah. Really, there is a point of time where it comes that all of these debates make no one but Iblis happy. It's one thing to talk about, to correct what's wrong, but at some point we're making Iblis happy with this, okay? Because it's taken us away from other things that are far more important. I would say far more practically imperative. They're happening right in front of us, whereas these are ideas. And yes, you have to correct the ideas, but we also have to look at what's happening right in front of us. There are people that are losing their deen for very much simpler things, like going to the prom and prom weekend. Did you go to the prom and prom weekend?
Prom weekend?
Yeah? Good for you. Okay. Bidawchi is Athari Aqidah outside Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. Hanbali Aqidah. Don't say Athari. Athari is a broad scope. Which one are you talking about? So Hanbali Aqidah, no one would ever say that it's outside of Ahl Sunnah. Is it haram to buy an electric vehicle given the unethical environmental implications? I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with the environmental and ethical implications of the electric vehicle, the EV industry. So I'm not the right person to ask because I'm not familiar with the implications on that. I mean, what about a regular gas automobile that puts up things into the environment that are not good for the environment? That's probably would be even worse for the environment. What about garments below the ankles? The garment below the ankle, if we notice that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, whoever drags his izar takabbura. That's the condition there. That you are dragging or lengthening your izar out of arrogance. Meaning just like if you see the old Roman movies. Omar, why don't you pull up one of these pictures, the old Roman senator or something like that. And they would wear a big izar, a big thobe, and it would drag. It would drag. And that was a sign of wealth and a sign of grandeur that you would drag your thobe. Yeah, see if the one that where they drag it, like the old kings. Yeah, something like that. But is there one that drags even more? So that is out of kibr. Then yes, that is sinful. That is sinful. But if you're talking about the pants of today, where everyone wears it even past the ankle, but there is no kibr sought, it's just the urf of how these pants are worn, then the application, the condition didn't apply to you. Or another example, if it's you bought it, you purchased it and it was large and didn't get a chance to cut it, for example, the condition doesn't apply. Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq, of course, we know that narration in which he asked the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam if it applies to him. He said that due to his thinness, the izar goes down a bit from his waist and passes his ankle. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that you do not do it intending takabbur. So the condition here is with the intent of takabbur. You see, what's going to happen is this, I'm going to tell you. Waqqas is going to clip that. It's going to go up. Then everyone's going to say, people are dying in Gaza and you're talking about the pants. Listen, it's open QA. Waqqas, clip this part too. It's open QA. People can ask any questions they want and I would answer them if I know the answer. So it's not that we're promoting these subjects as this is what we're going to set the talk as today, but it's open QA. So don't come and write a comment that is so out of touch with what we're doing here and say, people are dying in Gaza, but you're talking about pants. I'm talking about what the people are asking in this segment because it's called Open QA. Thoughts of being looked down upon and thinking the worst of others is a question here. How do I deal with such thoughts? To be honest with you, the human being is a creature that. Hey, get me my stand, will you? The stand, the iPad stand. It's somewhere here. The human being is someone who. Oh, there it is. Thank you. Yeah, actually, don't get up because something's gonna fall if you get up. Something's gonna fall. Camera's gonna tip. Something's gonna happen.
No, I don't think so.
If you're somebody who's very upset that you get these feelings of comparison all the time, this is a disease that I think everybody suffers to a degree. Everyone suffers to a degree. And it's a terrible, terrible feeling in your heart. Well, there's one simple solution to that. Decrease your exposure to created beings, to humans. You can get that feeling from scrolling. Oh my gosh, he did this. Oh my gosh, he accomplished that. Oh my gosh, that's who he's marrying. Oh my gosh, this, that, and the other. You start making yourself feel down. You mix with people too much, you will feel down. Guaranteed. The solution is a little bit of uzla and khalwa. So hey, it's time for you to go do a good deed. Can you see why this thing is not producing any cold air? What is going on here? It's not that hot that the AC is not working. Come around.
My face sweat.
Yeah, we're all sweating here. It's hot. The cure is a little bit more uzla an al-khalq, if that's what's going to cure your heart. And a little bit more, it is coming out cold. So just push the curtains probably is blocking it. A little bit more remembrance of Allah, being out in nature, being all alone in nature, and now the spring and summer's coming, you will feel better. I think that being in a home alone, it's claustrophobic. There's a reason why Allah made us feel that way. So being out in nature is far better. And remembering Allah, remembering death, all these are the cures for that terrible, terrible feeling of comparisonitis. It's a terrible, terrible disease that comes like a flu of the heart. It knocks you out. You can't act. You can't do anything. You feel so miserable. You're always sad. You have a great blessing in front of you, but you can't be happy with it. I think that's a good clip for Waqas too. Comparisonitis. Terrible disease. Book recommendation in Spanish for a new Muslim. We should know this. We have Spanish dawah going on here, but I can't tell you off the top of my head what there is. We'll have to find out and get you the answer to that. What should you look for when searching for a Murabbi? Firstly, what is a Murabbi? Murabbi, you're talking about someone who you have a very intimate relationship with, who guides you in the path of Islam. Not only teaches you Sharia, but more guides your heart. Do this dhikr next. And teaches you matters of the heart. You look for somebody, very simple, who is effective in changing you and whose teachings are in line with the Sunnah and Jama'ah. See how simple that is? It was actually Sheikh Abdul Hakim Murad who answered that question a long time ago. He said that the sign of a true path and a true guide, he affects you. You feel change. And you may actually end up moving on. For example, your first teacher in Islam will affect you. He's bringing so many new ideas, so many new things. Then you may squeeze him like a sponge. I've taken everything from him. And I've heard it all before. I'm not moved anymore. Khalas, you graduated. That's called graduation from that sheikh. You don't discard him. You owe him. You owe him gratitude for life. Man allamani harfan sirtu lahu abda. Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib And we know that many sayings are attributed to him. We don't know what is what. So I'm just saying that there's a well-known saying. It's attributed to Sayyidina Ali. Who knows what's true? Because Sayyidina Ali has so many sayings attributed to him, and Allah knows best what's true and what's not. But it's said, whoever teaches me a letter, I become a slave to him. So we always have to thank. We are not people who throw our old shuyukh in the garbage. No, we always honor them. Allah put them at the level that they teach the beginners, let's say. Then you're going to move on to someone else. He inspires you. He moves your heart to get close to Allah and forget about distraction. It's not that you fight distraction. You forget about it. You are so enraptured with his teachings. But you have to make sure the teaching is sound too. So you take the knowledge that you do know and you compare it to what he's saying. Is he saying from the book and the sunnah and the sharia and the madhahib? Then yes. And he's moving my heart and I feel like I'm getting better? Then yes. You tick off those two boxes, follow them. Follow that person. Focus. Don't let yourself be distracted shopping around. Focus on that person. Benefit. Squeeze it all out. And you may reach a sheikh that you'll never keep. And those are the real shuyukh. The terminal shuyukh, we call that. Terminal. You'll never pass him. You'll never say, I squeezed enough from him. No, these are the shuyukh, the murabbis. And they're usually heads of the turuq, the righteous turuq that are upon the sharia. And there are. Some people say, no, they're all astray. Really? So name them all. If you're judging that they're all astray, then name them. If you can't even name them all, how are you judging that they're astray? Right? So there are many, many, many shuyukh out there who have turuq. They may not be like publicly having turuq. And having a tariq and being a sheikh and a murabbi does not mean that they're having a masjid and dancing around in a circle, doing, ring around the rosy and everything that you imagine them to be doing. No. Sometimes they're just a regular sheikh. He teaches, he lives his life, he talks to people, and he lives like everyone else, but he is a sheikh and a murabbi. Why is it that the Ikhwan al-Muslimin got away with having a bay'ah, and all the supporters of Ikhwan al-Muslimin never talk about that there's a bay'ah, and they never condemn that, and they're totally accepting of that in the Arab world? But when it comes to a sheikh to do tarbiyah, and he employs, sometimes they employ a bay'ah and sometimes not, that all of a sudden is a scandal? It's an agreement to follow him, to obey him in what is beneficial in the deen and halal, and it is an agreement essentially that he will pay attention to you. So you could probably I could probably find a personal trainer, these high-level personal trainers in Hollywood and LA and all that train the actors, that you probably under contract. You only eat what he tells you to eat. One trainer, he discarded a singer because he caught them on a clip drinking a Coke. You're not allowed to do this. Well, I'm wasting my time here. I'm coming and spending 5 hours a day with you. We work out from 8 in the morning until 11. Then you have a meal. Then you have a break. Then you come back at 4 p.m., to 6. Then you have work out again. Then you have another meal. They do this for 5-6 weeks until they get in shape for the movies. They have deals. You must obey him or else the deal is off. So that's an unlawful contract. The fact that it's a lawful contract, firstly, no one would ever say that it's an unlawful contract. Okay, it is an oath that you will pay attention to me and train me, and I will listen to you in what is valid in the Sharia. The moment you ask me to do something unlawful, I'm not breaking the oath. And if I break the oath and I want to break with you, khalas, I fast 3 days. I broke my oath. Okay.
Is it permissible to break a bay'ah with a sheikh?
Of course, it's permissible. You fast 3 days because it's like a commitment, like a nether almost, or like not a nether, but it's an agreement.
So that's fasting 3 days is the expiation for.
Correct. Yeah. So that's what a murabbi means, and there are many in the world today. I'm telling you. It doesn't just have to be his turban this big, and he has a parade every time he walks from point A to point B. A parade of 50,000 people are following him, carrying flags. It's not like that for everybody. This is like imagination now. No. Do you know any shuyukh in Germany? Who was it? Sheikh? One of Habib's, Habib Omar has a student in Germany. Is it Mahmoud? Sheikh Mahmoud in Germany. In Germany, it's Sheikh Mahmoud. Look him up. I don't know his last name, unfortunately. But it's Sheikh Mahmoud. I see him in Umrah. I saw him in Umrah like 2 years in a row. But I can't remember his last name. Is it a red flag if a Murabbi is harsh-natured? It's maybe. You have to see if what suits you. You have to see what suits you. You can't. No, you have under no obligation here. You have to realize this. Should I do dua before or replacing old flowers from a grave with new fresh one? So Sadaqat is asking the question, which we have to now answer the question: is a Muslim allowed to go to a grave and put flowers on the grave? Of course, there's another one that's going to be, it's an answer, is going to be clipped. And then people are going to say, oh, you're talking about flowers and graves when people are dying in Gaza. It's predictable now. But then we're going to answer it anyway because this is open QA. The Prophet ﷺ pointed to two people at the grave. And he said they're being punished, but not for something major. But it's major. Meaning they thought it's not major. And in life, people don't think this is a big deal. But with Allah, it's a big deal. It's a big deal because one of them, he didn't clean himself from urine after. He wasn't cautious about cleaning up urine after going to the bathroom. What does that mean? It means his prayers are not going to be valid. He's not taking seriously something Allah told him to take seriously because he used his mind, and in his mind he said, this is not important. But who are you when Allah says that something's important? Why are you judging big and small? Your judgment of what's big and small is irrelevant. There's nothing big and small when Allah speaks about it. If Allah were to speak about it, then it's a big deal. It's not for you to judge what's a big deal and what's a small deal. Furthermore, gossiping. It's forbidden to go around gossiping like this. And this other man was gossiping. Even sometimes the gossip, it's not hurtful and it's not a lie. So what's the problem? Well, the problem is you're creating an environment now for misunderstandings. And you're creating an environment now for people to maybe start envying each other or disliking each other. It's forbidden. Then the Prophet ﷺ took a branch and he placed it on their graves. And he said perhaps that this will decrease the punishment as long as they stay green. Why? Because of the tasbih of green things. Things that are alive have a type of consciousness in which they make tasbih. They praise Allah. Tasbih means they're praising Allah. So therefore, that's a sunnah there that these things can decrease punishment. Anything that would have the capacity of tasbih. Humans have the capacity of tasbih. That's one of the proofs that you can recite Quran, make dua, do dhikr, and bring anything green. So the only correction here is that it's not limited to flowers. Anything green, okay, that you put it there. So long as it's green, there will be some tasbih, and there will be a decrease in any hardship that they're suffering.
What about graveyards in the grass?
What about the grass? Grass is green, so it applies, yes.
Even if
Okay.
they're non-Muslims?
No.
Only if they're believers.
Yeah, we're talking about Muslim graveyards. So the answer to that is it doesn't make a difference whether or not you make dua before or after. It doesn't make a difference. But it is permitted to put those things on the graveyard just directly from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Darul Amin, thank you. He says, the Sheikh is named Martin Mahmoud Kellner. So that's the organization. That's a Sheikh you want to look up if you're in Germany. His name again is Martin Mahmoud Kellner. Can we pray at a musalla in a graveyard? Yes. Your thoughts on Imran Hossein's views on the Quran in the podcast with Dilly? I didn't see that clip. I saw the clip in which he essentially holds the Russian Orthodox not to be kuffar. And that's the clip that everyone was talking about in terms of, or at least Drake Brancatella's clip on that. And again, it's the first pillar of Islam. Are we going to is that now up for discussion? Is that now something that needs analysis? And he said, I don't have a long time on this podcast, enough time to teach you the Quran regarding the truth of the matter. Well, is there now a big tafsir on whether or not we need to believe in Allah and all of His messengers and all of His books and the angels? Is that something we need now? That is something that is unnecessary. This is known in religion by necessity that you have to believe in these things. I'm sorry. Can you be a vegetarian, but every Friday you eat a steak? It's in the word, right?
Same thing with the asking original Shuyukh.
Yeah.
Shabir Ali.
You want to share that so we can all hear it? Yeah. Find the clip and put it on. Okay. And let me tell you something, people. Don't be fooled by huge beards. That many beginners, they will literally just skip if somebody doesn't have a huge beard. They'll skip. And if he does, they'll really take it seriously. You cannot be that naive, people. I'm telling you. If he has a humongous beard and Islamic clothes and caps and all that, that's not how judgments are. That's not how judgments are made. Yeah, it's not how judgments are made. And you can go to Sham and you go to Sheikh Mahmoud in Syria, the Syrian scholar in Turkey, who's one of the most amazing scholars alive. And he wears a shirt and pants and he has a trimmed beard. Like if he was walking, you wouldn't even know, you'd probably think he's an engineer and he's part of ICNA, right?
It's like they're on standby, these guys. Remember last time?
Yeah. Omar's telling us there's a lot of hate watchers and spammers. Well, it's good. I benefit from views. The organization benefits from views, so I could care less, right? And the more hate, the more comments, whether good or bad, it benefits. So if you really try to want to harm what we're saying, don't give it attention. Okay.
Shabir Ali has a huge beard and wears Islamic.
If a person, I can't have you talking too much because you have no mic. So every time you talk and I have to stay silent, then the audience hears nothing. So don't take offense, but I can't have you talking too much. If a person sees the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in a dream, will they see him sallallahu alaihi wasallam in a wakeful state in their lifetime? That is based upon the hadith. من رآني في المنام فسيراني في اليقظة. Maybe we can read the shuruhat on that, but the answer to your question is not necessarily. There's many cases in which people saw the Prophet in a dream, but not in the wakeful state, and we'll read the shuruhat on that soon. So now that you bring it up, your opinion on Sheikh Tahir al-Qadri's works. I know he did a lot of great work, and I know he was involved in some controversy in terms of prayers with Hindus and things like that. So, but I can't really comment any much except that I know that he is from Ahl Sunnah. His work, his scholarly works, are more than rooted in Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. That's what I can tell you. But the latest updates of his political life, I can't tell you. That I don't know. Is it shirk or haram to make dua to awliya and ask their istighatha? I'll tell you what shirk exactly is. When you ask any created being, there's two things. When you ask any created being, that which only Allah can grant. This is the meaning from Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in alludes to this. Only you are worthy of worship. There's certain things is only worthy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in isti'ana, seeking help, only you we seek help in those matters that only Allah can provide. For example, the guidance of the heart. For example, creating something. For example, forgive all my sins. Of course, I can ask somebody to forgive me if it's an offense of that person. So, I stole from you. All right, I give it back. Forgive me. Yes, that I can ask. But I cannot ask somebody like in church, I sinned privately in my own home and I drank khamr. Forgive my sin. No, only Allah can forgive your sin. Only Allah can create. So certain things are only in the power of Allah. To ask any created being of that is shirk. Secondly, to believe even tasabbuban wa adatan. We have to define that. Tasabbuban wa adatan. Tasabbuban wa adatan means that in this life there are middlemen, there are means. For example, the means to get a cure is to go to the doctor. The means to get my car fixed, to go to the mechanic. The means to get educated, to go to the teacher. To believe that that person has true power in himself, that's not law, that's shirk too. So I go to him, I ask him even, please take me as a student. Please do the surgery on me. So I ask him. To believe he has power, that's shirk for us. We believe you have no power. You are a sabab. Now, the question is to ask that person who has no power. Su'al al-ajiz. Who has adatan. Adatan means in our customary daily life. We don't believe you have power, but we may say the words. We may talk as if you do. Oh, he can help you. Yes, that's just the way we talk. But in our theology, we don't believe he has any power. So we separate between our theology and the day-to-day speech. The day-to-day speech, yeah, he saved my life. I'm allowed to say that. Because I mean, Allah used him to save my life. Okay. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, Allahu yatawaffa al-anfus. Allah takes your souls. It is Allah. However, he also says, Malakul maut alladhi yatawaffakum. Right? So he attributes this taking of the soul to the angel of death. So that's the proof that we are allowed to speak about the means with the same language as the source. I'm allowed to say that doctor saved my life. Meaning, I believe he is the sabab by which. I say my parents raised me. My parents fed me. As a dad, I can say I'm the one who feeds you. Yes, I am the one Allah sent as a means to feed you, to give you, to raise you, all that. So that's the aqeedah there. That's why we say the word adatan, in or tasabbuban, as a means. Now, for me to ask someone who is absolutely has no power, something that I may have otherwise asked a created being, such as for a job, for money, for food. I can ask a human being for these things, right? But for me now to ask something that cannot help me is makruh, because it's a waste of time. And if it would make people think ill of me, worse, even think that I'm a mushrik, then it's haram. Okay? So for example, nobody's going to go to, hey Siri, where can I find free money? You do that all day long. It's makruh for you to do that. Meaning you're wasting time. It's abath. I mean, it could be even haram because it's abath. It's uselessness. So say hypothetically that someone comes with a belief that the dead man in the grave can help you. And you say, oh, give me money. No, I don't believe that he has power in himself. I don't believe that. But he's just like you. He's power to fly around and bring me money because he's a big wali of Allah. So that's a belief, right? There's no proof for that. No explicit proof for that, but you believe that hypothetically. But you say, I'm asking him for something that humans can give. It's not limited to only what Allah can give. And I'm asking him believing he's a sabab, then maximum I'll tell you you're wasting your time. But now, people are going to think you're a pagan now, or a mushrik, because that's the perception now. So now it's haram. And that's exactly what Sheikh Hamza al-Bakri said when he quoted Abu Hanifa saying that he disliked people to say bihaqqi Muhammad, because someone may imagine that Allah owes something to the Prophet ﷺ, and we know that Allah does not owe anything to any creation. No matter how glorious and majestic Allah has made that created person, Allah owes nobody anything. So where it may ruin your reputation, cause confusion, and cause you to be blamed, then at that point it becomes something that a person should not do. And Allah knows best, he meant with whatever Abu Hanifa said, bit-tahrim or bil-karahiyah. So Shaykh Hamza al-Bakri cites that, and he talks about istighatha in that language. He said, now look at the perception of istighatha worldwide. Get your head out of the books. Look at the perception worldwide. People are going to accuse you, no matter what you say about the theology. So for that reason, he says he avoids it. And he holds it as something from sadd al-dhariya so that you're not accused. But anyway, that's where shirk is. Yes, there is istighatha can be shirk in these two ways. In the way that asking a created being that which only Allah can grant you. Or two, believing that that created being has any power in himself. That could be shirk outside of it. Like if I'm sitting and I'm dying and the doctor's right in front of me and I start to have a belief that he is the source of my cure, that right there is a problem. Forget graves. But who goes to graves in the United States? Is there graves of Awliya, right? I'm sure there are Awliya, but not that there's no history of this. So this has really just become a, one of these litmus test debates. And that's really all it is. It's pick a team, right? I need to know what your statement is on this so I know what your position is, what team you're on. And those ineffective, I only look at it because it's a good exercise in knowledge to see what we believe, why we believe it. Okay? And that's it. But other than that, it's really one of these, just a hot button question to see what group you're part of.
What about like unseen groups like Ya Rasulullah, lead our hearts?
Yeah, majaz is acceptable. We accept majaz. In other words, saying, Ya Rasulullah in these poems, we accept that. And even if you were to believe, if someone was to believe, and there is probably a lot of reason to believe, Rasulullah sees our actions. Yes, there's a hadith, Prophet ﷺ said, I'm shown your deeds. If I see good, I thank Allah. If I see other than that, then I seek istighfar for you. So that means that if I were to address the messenger, he receives it. What's wrong with that, right? But we would not ask that which is only in the power of Allah. We do not believe that anyone has power but Allah. And by the way, the Taymiyyans disbelieve in that. They believe that people do have power because Allah put it there. We believe no one has any power. And we may talk that people have power. We may say, you came, you went, you saved, you did this great thing, right? But that's adatan, tasabbuban. And on top of that, whether or not anyone deceased from the awliya or the NBF can help you, we have really no absolute certainty on every case on that in your worldly life. So it's done. And all of this is a quotation, not from myself, but from Sheikh Mahmoud Shabib and from other ulama in Aqidah and from other books that I'm summarizing for you. So it's not my take on the subject, it's what I've gathered from ulama on this subject. Aisa Moreno, yes, you can email info@safinasociety.org for any questions you have about studying abroad or shuyukh in different countries if you're trying to connect with somebody. Ladies and gentlemen, we will stop right here. A lot of good questions, a lot of good discussion here. And again, if you want to study with us in half an hour isn't it now? Class should start now. So right away, we close this stream. We're going to open up the reading of Sheikh Habib Omar's work on Mahiyat al-Tasawwuf wa Simati Ahli. If you want to join that, sign up right now at arcview.org to ArcView Essentials. Click on it. Immediately you get an email. Click the link and you'll see us there. Jazakumullah khairan. Subhanakallah bihamdik. نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله.